I am so excited to be able to introduce our facilitators for today on this topic of coaching with your strengths and values. Both Aurora and Tenice have a lot of expertise in just being able to tap into one's energy in order to coach most effectively. Tenice, she's an executive coach with a background in HR, in executive leadership, and numerous certifications. And her key words are passionate, harmonious, and adaptive. We're going to hear more about those today. And Aurora Geis is the lead coach at Digital Creative Institute. She built out their coaching program where she's developing millennial leaders, but she also does a lot of individual coaching as well, just helping leaders and entrepreneurs find their brand and really make an impact. So we want to hear more about these key words: tenacious, seer, and faithful. So I'll turn it over to both of you to lead our conversation.
Fantastic. Well, Tenice, take it away.
Hey, thanks for the introduction and all the information on all the exciting events that are coming up. Aurora and I got together and really looked at thinking about your strengths and your values and where those kind of naturally come from. And as we were going through this particular process, we really collaborated, and the four elements of earth, wind, fire, and water really kind of resonated with us. And when you think about those, they're actually the philosophy behind the four elements, and they really originated from ancient Greece. And so it was that all things that matter consist of a combination of these fundamental constituents. And the purest form of the elements were impossible to obtain and actually said not to exist on Earth. And so from a Greek perspective, they're looking at these and saying, there really are elements that drive us and driving forces. And so as this has evolved, it's really looked into the elements that really connect us with who we are and connect us together. And so they look at the four elements of earth, wind, fire, and water, and they look at how they are connected with these four states of matter. And in more modern science, they actually look at them as being, the solid, the liquid, the gas, and the plasma. So you get, as you can see, as things transition into more technological forms, even the language is changing. But when we look at this, you look at the earth, and the earth is solid, it's grounded. You look at water, and water is full of life and vibrant. The wind is always very active, and things are going on with the wind and the activity and the force of the wind. And then the focus of the fire. The fire is going to be very raging, and all of these can be used in a positive aspect, or maybe a more negative. We'll talk a little bit later about a joyous or an angry aspect of each one of these. But it's really looking at how do these connect to what we do, what we believe in, what are our natural innate strengths, but what are our values? What are the things that at our core we really want to make sure that we can stay connected to? Because when you live in your strengths and your values, you're going to have more energy to dedicate not only to your clients, but also to yourself. And that's what we really want to focus on today, is how can you take these elements and make sure you're using the elements, your natural strengths, and your values in connecting to add the most value to your client and the most energy to yourself. So Aurora, what would you like to add?
What Tenice has already given you is the entire construct of these 4 powerful elements. So I just encourage you to listen in and really hone in on an example where over time you have demonstrated one of these core elements. We'll continue to provide more context and have a rich conversation on how not only you can apply this, but again, you could apply it with your own clients. Okay. So as Tenice had mentioned, there are 4 elements and some more definition around that is related to how these are showing up for you. So when you look through each one of these elements, think about how this is applying to you. So in the element of fire, all-consuming fire, as Tenice mentioned, there are going to be levels of fire. But in this case, fire represents your personal drive. And that inner fire that keeps you ignited and or moving in the direction to drive results. And it's internal to you. So think about times in your coaching or even in your own life experiences where you have had this type of thinking and feeling and action when you're approached with a conversation with a client, when you are making decisions in your life. And then as we move on to water, we begin to see how this is your personal flow, your ability to balance. So again, going back to that example, perhaps when you're coaching a client or yourself making a decision, this is where you have truly moved into your own flow of making that decision, or your own flow where there are no boundaries. Just think about water. Even when it cuts through rock, it's just going to continue to move. That's what your personal, the people that are more aligned with the water element, they're going to move wherever there may be obstacles. And they're also able to provide a lot of balance in all aspects of their life, work and life and relationships. Think about all of those, the wheel of life that we are all well versed in. The context of how you're able to flow within those aspects. And then when we move down to earth, earth is more about how you are personally expressing yourself. What comes up are people that are very individualistic, where they perhaps are very different. So when you think about the element of the earth, you begin to look at spaces. So physical environment in your daily life, if we were to parallel a picture, earth could look like a beautiful park. So your physical environment could begin to exemplify a park, the attributes of the grass and the swing, or areas where there's play. It could also signify an environment where it's a fast highway. Your environment could look like the infrastructure of a highway where things are moving fast, maybe with technology, with relationship, with your work. So earth is a type that you're personally expressing yourself individualistically. Again, going back to the wheel of life, think about how you've been able to, or if you have expressed yourself in such a personal way that it is visible. it is tangible in your physical environment. And then we move to wind, and wind is different kinds of insights. And this is where we are able to really look at the different dimensions of not only common sense, but it's also the knowledge, it's the human knowledge, and then how those stack up with really creating inspiration and having that creativity that creates vision. When you think about the element of wind, wind you don't see, but you end up seeing the evidence of wind after it has gone through, say, trees. When you begin to see the wind, or you don't see the wind coming until the trees limbs have moved. So in this case, people that resonate with this element of wind are going to be the ones that show up in that environment, and they almost show up unannounced. But when they come through your environment or your decision, you absolutely see their creative and inspirational way of how they've been able to move people or move an organization. Any questions on those 4 elements?
As you were talking about them, I was thinking about, how much they're internal or external, because some might be you experience that particular element very deeply internally, but it may or may not be manifested externally as much. So yeah, it's interesting to picture what they look like.
And I think what's interesting about that, Carissa, is the fact that I think it's almost just like any personality test or anything that you measure. It's like we all have components of this within us. We all experience all 4 of these, but how we experience them is very different from maybe someone else. And some of those may be more internal, and some of them may be more external than others, and also impacted by potentially the situation.
Absolutely. And so we're going to continue to move into more of the characteristics. So Tenice, if you want to share a little bit more about these characteristics.
Yeah, and this is a busy slide, so and we get that. But what we would like you to do is we've talked about these characteristics kind of at a high level. I'm going to go through just a couple of additional meanings on each one of these. But what I want you to do is be thinking about which 2 resonate with you the most. So when you're thinking about you as a person or you as a coach, what really resonates with you? Is it the fire, the wind, the earth, or the water? And when you look at this fire, and it really demonstrates that activity that everyone knows when there's fire in an activity that someone does. It's the energy that they bring. They may not necessarily think about it as fire, but that energy and that high action-oriented activity, an extreme extrovert that's maybe going to be more assertive, more goal-focused, in actually making those goals happen. And it really is represented by that personal drive and that inner fire. It's what gets you going, what really keeps you moving. And then when we move on and we look at the wind, and as Aurora talked about earlier, you don't always see the wind. A lot of times people are very outgoing, they're sociable, they're fun, but it doesn't mean they're loud. You may not necessarily know where they are, where they're coming from, but yet you feel their presence. And they kind of stand out in that crowd a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's always in. Well, someone who has a lot of energy around when, you know, as it talks about, enjoy being the center of attention. I think a lot of times it's more being in that energy, in that it's always moving. Things are always going on, whether it's relevant, whether it's obvious or not. And then we look at Earth, and that is one that just really resonates with me. I think from a even a coaching perspective, it's just that connection, that warm, that friendly, you know, those close relationships. But I think about it from a grounded perspective. And I know many coaching philosophies really talk about when you're ready to get into a mindfulness or a serious or a space where you need to, you know, go through that coaching conversation. Are you grounded? And that's where the earth really comes in. And it's like, am I solid? Am I sitting solid on the earth? Am I connected to the earth in order to just let everything else go? And it sometimes gives you the ability to be more laid back and really be able to process the as a coach, maybe process the powerful questions that you need to be asking. But when your client is grounded, it really helps them create those aha moments, and they discover the answers and the way forward when they're grounded and really connected to the earth. So I feel like that's a very powerful one in a coaching relationship, regardless if it's high in your, you know, personal energy bank or not. And then the last one is the water, and the blue water is really introspective and reserved, and it's a lot about the thinking before taking action. Happy with their own company. That water can be very independent and have an expression of meaning in its life and those type of things. It's very calm, and you know, the harmony, if you recall, that was one of mine on my introduction slide, is harmonious, because it's that calming need for life, but it's that free flow of water that gives me a lot of energy when I am you know, really at peace.
I was going to add, Tenice, when we were walking through this presentation, we came up with some, not only these are demonstration of or evidence of strengths, but they're also evidence of what is driving the strength. So in the case of fire, we know that that value sounds like achievement, the value of really achieving success in their work or in their life. And when we talk about wind, this is really about the individual that is, pardon me, connecting with having fun. Fun is an important value to the people that resonate with the element of wind. And earth, we talked about that being very growth minded, because they're, although understated, you can always rely that these people are going to have steady growth. And with the water, it is about adaptability. These are the people that are most adaptive in their life. And we all have levels of these values, but those would be the core essence of these elements. Any other thoughts come up for you all in terms of the strength or the value that you see in these elements?
And you can either, unmute and join in the dialogue. It's perfectly fine. Add something to chat. What I would like to ask you to do, I actually think it's on the next slide, so I'm probably jumping the gun. Yeah. What is your core element? List your top one or two that you feel like you really connected to in the chat. So Carissa, as you listed Earth, the solid, you list that solid Earth. Anything in particular, any examples that you have that you would want to share that makes you connect to that?
I think that's my twin, Susanna.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, Susanna. That's okay.
I'm renaming myself. All
there
right.
you go.
There I go.
Okay.
Much
Susanna.
Yeah.
Earth, solid. What examples do you have that connect you to that?
Well, it says that it values relationships, especially family and friends, right? And so I feel that it's on the top of my list of values is quality, strong relationships, especially at this time in my life. That's what I hold, I cherish the most, right? There are other pieces that were included in that description, and it is the fact that people prefer consensus to confrontation. And that's me. I mean, I would much, much rather have a conversation and get to some type of agreement, even if we agree to disagree, rather than, just showing some really strong emotions and just the need of being right. I just don't need that. Something else that it talks about is calmness. And I think that's me, trying to be even and balanced and present at all times is something that I work very hard on. Keeping that constant presence of calmness and balance. So
nice.
Sorry, it was too long. But.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So Lisa,
I like the word solid because to me, solid means trusting and genuine and someone you can count on.
Yeah.
All the time.
Nice. So Lisa, anything to add? You were wind and earth. Anything different from what Susanna shared on earth, or anything to add about wind that resonated or connected with you?
I guess I'm a dust storm. Yeah, if you can you put the descriptions back up again? Yeah, I mean, for me, earth seemed to resonate a little bit more, but then the wind, that's just, having that joy and having that sociable, that fun, that's just part of what I want to bring to the world. So yeah, I'm split between those two. I don't know what else to say.
No, I think that's interesting. And Carissa's comment is it's hard to choose one. And Aurora and I had that same conversation when we were talking through all of it. As I said, my initial gut reaction was, oh, I'm definitely water. And then I started reading them and I'm like, oh, but sometimes I see the wind. I'm like, oh, I like being grounded in the air. I mean, so it's almost like they're just all parts of you. And I think they show up in different ways, which is what we think about when we're thinking about our strengths and our values. When and where do they show up,
Well,
and what gives you energy?
that was what I was thinking, like, who am I, within my private life and then my professional life? It's like you kind of, it goes back to years ago as a INFP for Myers-Briggs, but due to what I was doing for work, I'm an ENFP, so it's like, it's nothing nailed down completely, but it's a skill set. So I was like, I wonder if I just navigate between the communities that I'm in. I don't know. Maybe I'm not really clear on it just yet. So
We'll keep going. You may get some clarity as we build, but there is also the adaptability. I mean, some people are much more adaptive than others, and I think when you look at this, I'm in other types of assessments and things. I'm very adaptive in nature. You're probably very adaptive in nature, Lisa, and so that's where you start looking at it, and it starts going, ooh, it depends on the situation. Very nice.
Carissa, I see that you have a comment here on your core element. Walk us through your thinking. Uh-oh, Carissa, are you frozen? There you are.
Frozen now. Yeah, when I saw the images and even the definitions on the previous page that just had the words, what I was drawn to there was very different than reading these definitions, because I thought, oh, I'm wind. I love being insightful and seeing how all these ideas connect. But then looking at them the way they're laid out here with what are the different energies, it was like, no, wind is probably my bottom one, as much as I want to be wind. And it really, the water is the core for me of observing, and that's really where the insights come, is from just being that quiet observer that then is ready to share what's valuable. But I see earth and fire as a close duo right behind that. So it's interesting seeing how they all intersect.
A lot of diversity for sure. And that's how we are as human beings, very diverse. So as we move on, we'll talk about some of these elements. Tenice, you want to take joyful?
I will take joyful because I know how much you like the next one. So when you look at the joyful elements, really what you're looking at is you're looking at what exactly that, what brings you joy? What is a positive aspect? What is the energy, the positive energy that you have between each one of these? And for fire, it's that passion, it's that control, drive, consuming result. I mean, you're going full force like a raging fire, but yet you're in this joyous space. And so it's not that it's, I think the thing that really I think is interesting about these is you think about that fire and you say the word fire, most people go, oh, hot or burn or, but when you really think of it as an element and how it connects to your passion, it really gives it a little, not really a little bit, a lot of a different meaning and purpose behind it. And then just as we were talking about from a wind is, what is that motion? It's spontaneous. It's going to blow one direction, blow the other direction. And being spontaneous really is joyful to some people. Some people it stresses out. Lisa mentioned the MBTI. You know, some forms of MBTI, the P, spontaneous, is exactly where they want to be, and that gives them energy. But the J is like, I want to be planned and structured. And so it is that doesn't mean you don't want to be active, doesn't mean you don't like the intelligence or the intellect or the change, having that change management. I look at all of these as kind of being on a continuum. So you think about that continuum, and you know, my spontaneity is probably a little lower. My change maybe in the middle somewhere, but then my activity and activeness is high. So it's what components of that win do I really connect to? And I talked about the solid performance or the solid under earth earlier. I mean, just that stability, that groundedness. I mean, I love some semantics and just really being able to breathe and be grounded in where where you are. And so, and then obviously on the first slide, the water is my harmony and is calm. I am at peace, and that's what I thought was interesting and why the word water resonated with me is I am at peace anytime I'm with water. I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm at the ocean or if I'm sitting. I mean, just this last weekend or maybe Monday, you know, we sat out on the patio for hours while it just rained and rained. I mean, so just that water is just calming to me. And so it's just interesting when you look at how hard these are, and we all said, it's okay, which one do I select? Well, I just went through all of those and had something very positive about each one. So there's a component to all of them that create those joyous elements and connect me to my strengths and my values.
Yeah. And what's beautiful about what Tenice just said is connecting with your strengths. So think about when you are operating at your core and you're able to really create something that is very positive in terms of output. So I'm sure you all are familiar with the Enneagram would call that integration. This is when you are fully at your best, fully integrated. You're going to have one of these elements that are going to supersede the other. And I know for me, my element is absolutely wind. Even though I have an expression of water, I want to be able to move. But most of the time, I don't want to have all that attention. I just want to be able to move wherever I need to move, to have the impact that I need to have in order to change a circumstance. And always active. I would have to say that that's my go-to, is always being active, taking action, moving forward. So for us, it's to really identify not only how we are resonating when we're fully integral with our core, and how even our clients, when they begin to exhibit some of these strengths, it is because at their core, they're exhibiting one of these elements. Anyone have an example of how they see themselves in this element of joy?
I think for me, out of all of this, is the water is what really connects. And I think because of my facilitation, my experience and my passion for facilitating groups, that's my sweet spot, that I just love to be in that flow and the harmony and, you know, picking up on little cues. So.
How wonderful, Lisa, that you connected the facilitation of your flow, which is bringing the people together. and think about all those different personalities trying to get them on a common mission. And you're just adapting to each and every one of them as you're moving or dancing or, with them. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Anybody else?
I love adding the word dancing to wind.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Harder to dance in water, but can be done.
Probably so. Okay, Aurora.
All right.
Your favorite slide.
My favorite, right. So anger. These are the elements that when we are disintegrated with our core, they show up. And perhaps they show up in our clients. So when we begin to look at the anger element of fire, everybody knows when fire is upset. And they can stay angry. They can keep that fire burning as long as there is fuel. As long as there is day and time, they will continue to just let that fire burn. And remember, you will know it. You will absolutely know it. And as you want to approach the person with this element, you will feel the heat. You will feel their heat or the heat they're making you feel when they're angry. And then the wind is throwing things around. So they take a lot of energy and they begin to move things quickly they move things very quickly. And you can see where the things that have been thrown, where they've shifted. There's evidence of where they've thrown things around. But the beauty about this element is they don't stay angry for long. Because it's just like the wind, it comes and it may be like a torrential wind, but then it goes and it dissipates. With earth, there is going to be tremendous calm until you feel the shaking of the ground. So it may be an example where you're working with someone, but you feel like the ground is being unsettled. It is being unearthed. And then you will also feel from this core element like they're like a volcano when it erupts. And it is not just earth shattering, but there's also going to be impact. You will feel a difference when earth is angry at their core. Maybe in a work environment, maybe a leader, they may be very calm, but the minute that finances perhaps starts to dip, then you start feeling people getting cut. That is just one example. There are many others. Water slowly comes to a boil. And just like boiling water, you have steam and it begins to disappear. Or, depending on the situation, it could either get heated up or they could cool down like ice. And you will see the evidence of both. You'll feel the steam with people when they're angry that have the water element. You will feel it, just like putting your hand over the steam. You will feel the steam and it is going to make it very uncomfortable interacting with them. But when it comes to the ice, you feel like you have no ground with them. There's no traction. You're just sliding on and there's no way to interact or communicate with people with the water element when they're angry. So now let me turn it back over to you all. How do you see this show up? Anger connects with water as well. It sounds so much like me, Susanna.
Well, and so here's what's interesting as I think about this. You know, I do a Hogan assessment, which is one of the assessments that we'll actually have in the resources, and it talks about the dark side of your strengths, and that's what I connect to with the anger elements. We're you know, use the water. You know, we are flowing, we are with the flow, things are just, you know, calm, there's harmony. But then when it gets rough and rocky, it can get really boiling and rough and rocky, and can go to the extreme. So where you want harmony and calmness and you want to be connected with others, you get under stress or you get in a really difficult or uncomfortable situation, you may disappear. You may become cold as ice because you're in that uncomfortable side of the element. It's not the joyful, it's not the strength that you connect with your energy.
It's different from the others in that water tends to hold on. It's that slow simmering anger for a long time that may even be more pernicious than the explosive anger that's quite violent, but then it's gone.
Like the fire. So you talked about, I mean, usually that, you know, people who can just get really upset and angry and they voice their opinion or whatever, and then they just go, okay, I'm done, I'm over it, you know, and they move on. You know, that's kind of that fire. It's there and it's hot, but it doesn't last long.
Yeah. And also the evidence. You know, think about the impact that these emotions have when we're interacting, or when our clients perhaps are interacting through the coaching session. You know, we will see I think that there's devastation in all of these elements. Some of them are more visual than others. And so the question becomes, how are these anger elements hampering us from serving our clients?
And we have to be aware of that. So that's where you look at, okay, there's the joyful elements of our strengths overall and the anger elements of our strengths and values overall, and how are those showing up?
I just want to say that I can see working with clients that the joyful elements are there, right? How that impacts my strengths and values. I have a very, very hard time seeing myself in anger when I'm working with clients, but I see myself experiencing anger in my personal life. And to me, the way I interpret water is that same calmness and stability, balance that provides you joy. In the case of anger, is being very flexible, very tolerant, very patient for a long time. And then, you know, it starts bothering you and it starts taking a different turn. And it's not so much the explosion of anger, but it's more like disappointment and loss of interest, right? It's like letting you down. And so that's when it becomes ice. That relationship becomes ice, because there's nothing left in the relationship that brings joy to you.
Very insightful.
Yeah. And Susanna, when you were describing the differences between the earth and the water, I started to think about the impact that volcanoes have on the terrain And volcanoes, they devastate land. And it also goes out into the ocean in order to cool off, but it isn't for decades, if not centuries, before that land can be habitable. And in the relationships with anger, that's how I was correlating that when we erupt, we begin to change the landscape of the relationship. And it will take more time to develop that relationship so that it's thriving. But then there's this intersection that you mentioned with water, where it shifts to ice. And as you were talking, my mind went to Antarctica. No one lives out there. I mean, there's a station, right? Not very many people are there, but it's uninhabitable. No one can live there. Nothing can grow there. It's just taking up space, but there's no life on it. And just like relationships, there's no life. There's no way for the relationship to grow, except for steep isolation. So those are the things that came up as you were talking.
That's very interesting that you make those analogies with nature. At the same time, I will say there's calmness in Antarctica. But at least, yeah, I know it's not, but when I picture it, is that this place that's kind of evenly white and has its own beauty. And when I think of an earthquake or a volcano erupting, right, it's devastating. But then after time goes by, in the midst of the devastation, there's growth again.
Yes.
And so there's I interpret that as regaining trust, regaining relationships, right? Or sometimes there's hope where you were hopeless, right? There's destruction and there's bare branches or whatever. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it starts blooming again. And a little leaf comes out, and it comes out more beautiful and stronger than before.
Yes. That's beautiful, Susanna, how you are also interpreting back to your core strength of earth and the stability, the solid, predictable, measured, and growth. You go back to growth. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, back to growth. This is awesome.
Well, we have another question for you, Tenice.
So and let me kind of, I guess, explain where this is coming from. And this is what I want you to think about is, how does your element or your strengths and values align with the ICF core competencies? And you can unmute or put them in the chat if you have one that you feel like aligns with the core competencies. And the reason that we really wanted to go here is because we talk about the energy that you have with using your strengths and your values and living within your strengths and your values. And when you have that energy, that's when you're joyful. So we've just kind of gone through that. And while we look at then aligning those with the ICF core competencies, is there an area that is more or less effective? And so making sure that when our core our strengths are aligned with the core competency, that's where we're going to be comfortable and have our space. And then when they're not, that's when it maybe puts a little more stress or a little more uncomfortableness on us. But knowing that we want to make sure that we're coaching around all of the core competencies, we have to go through the process that will make sure that we know where we're living within our strengths and where we're not. And so we can align those. And if you want to go ahead, Aurora, and move us to the next slide, because I know we're kind of short on time. This is a way that you can actually, an energy advantage that you can look at, and you can use energy advantage in a lot of different ways. But when I think about this, I think about you rating everything that you do kind of within that coaching environment, and you look at everything you do and the time you spend on it is giving you energy, and it's joyous, or the things that you do are joyous and give you energy for you and for your client. And that's where you want to spend the most of your time. And so you want to leverage your strengths. But then when there's something that doesn't give you energy, maybe it's not angry, it's not quite the anger element, but those that maybe don't give you a lot of energy, but you know it adds value to your client, how can you assess how you can make sure you show up in that manner because it's important to your client? And then those things that you assess that maybe they bring you no energy, they bring out those anger elements in you or in your client. How can you make sure that those things go away? You stop doing those, or you outsource those, or you find a way to do them differently, so it brings it up to a 1 or a 2, where it gives you joy yourself, as well as potentially you and your client's joy. And so making sure that the strengths that you have and the values that you have, you're living to those. This is just an exercise that you can go through that can really help you connect that.
Thank you, everybody. I've got to run.
Thanks,
Okay.
Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. Good to see you.
Are you going to share this deck afterwards? Yeah.
Yes.
I think I would like to take some time to go through this, and I think this is a great exercise.
No, absolutely. And then we actually have the next slide. We fly quite right past the Q&A. Some assessments and some resources. And these are some things that will help you and your clients identify strengths and values and personalities and different things like that can help you find where you have that joyous energy in the elements, or potentially the anger elements.
Well, I think that wraps it up in terms of our presentation. We hope that this was beneficial. And before we sign off, if there's one thing that you are going to take away, what would that be?
I love thinking about how my energy connects with all parts of the coaching conversation, looking at those 11 competencies. And I could actually see how when I'm in flow with that water value, it really can tie to every aspect, whether it's setting the agreement with the client, or certainly the trust and the coaching presence. I think those two really tie in with the water. But even if I approach all of the elements, setting action can still be done from that perspective of flow and adaptability. So yeah, that was my takeaway.